To Mr. Winston Jordan, you is a great man. To the Guyanese citizen, as a minister to the South America land called Guyana. So much negative, so much propaganda. The PPP are trying to tell upon you, but keep speaking the truth. The truth is always there forever. The best finance minister I ever seen in Guyana. Oh yeah, Lord, please guide and protect him each and every day. He is full of knowledge and experience and things that going on in this country. Jordan is a cool and humble man. He educate and dedicate to the society. Over 30 years he give to we in this ministry. Yeah, yeah. Jordan is for all. Lord, no, you will always stand tall. Tall. Yeah. Oh yeah. I am a Guyanese citizen. I never meet you and I never talk to you, but for you good works you have done for this country. I'm singing this song to you, Mr. Winston Jordan. We as Guyanese citizens saying we love you. Yes, we love you. Lord, let no weapon that come against him shall prosper. Lord, you is the God from heaven. You is the God from heaven. Oh, honors and respect to Mr. Winston Jordan. Guyanese, we love you, Winston Jordan. Yeah, yeah.
Today is budget day. And then a lot of people say, so what? A lot of people say, what does it mean? And when people have to come to the situation, to the condition or the situation where they have to say, so what, or what does budget day mean, right? You could you could understand how far we have come. You know, I always remember growing up that my first interest in budgeting was shaped by my father taking me down to Parliament Building, walking from Station Street to Parliament Building very early to listen to budget being read in the House of the National Assembly. Because it was a big thing in those days. People would assemble to listen to it. Today, people no longer assemble. And it's been made worse for the listeners because now it's a race to break the record of delivery from the previous year. I think the record is now being held by Ashley for last year's delivery. And God forbid, I think he's going to break the record today. And at that stage, people tune out. They don't listen anymore. The ones who listen are the ones who are forced to listen. You just got to look at the broadcast to see how reckless, or not reckless, restless their own people in the house become after a certain time. People sleeping, people playing on the phone, people fiddling, people getting up to go and take a bathroom break or a smoke break or a coffee break. It's too long. It's too long. It's torture. It's no longer budget. It's torture. I'm a budget, consider myself a budget person. But I'm not prepared to listen to those hours. Not at my age. I need frequent bathroom breaks. Torture. No budget should be that thing. So my first recommendation on this budget day is that consideration be given, not by standing orders or any such, but by the government, and in particular the reader, to restrict the activity of presenting the budget to no more than 3 hours, maximum. Maximum 3 hours. And as a result of that restriction, imposed, self-imposed restriction, you shape the budget speech in a manner that it will reflect the important aspects of the performance of the economy for the previous year, and it will dwell on the important aspects of the projections for the current year. The monotonous and labored details can be left to the presentations by the individual ministers and MPs during the budget debate. And it's about time that the time, and this is about debate and the speech, it is about time that the budget calendar, uh, uh, um, that whole budget presentation, passing estimates, it's about time that process be lengthened, because we're no longer talking about a budget of $100 and something million. We're talking about a budget of thousands of millions of dollars, thousands of billions of dollars now, because we're talking about it now of $1 trillion budget. So $1 trillion got 12 knots, $1 billion got 9 knots, and $1 million got 6 knots. So we are talking here of a budget that is thousands of billions of dollars, not $100 million anymore. So you can't allow 5 days for debate on the speech and another 3.5 days or 4 days for consideration of the estimates of a $1 trillion+. So that's the first thing that has to change: the duration of the speech and the content of the speech. Those two have to change. And then, of course, the the calendar. So I would say 2 weeks for debate on the speech. That would give particularly the opposition more time. This business about equal time. And let me talk a little bit more on that. During the debate on the speech, I think each MP who is not a shadow, if I recall, is allowed 15 minutes plus 5 to wrap up, to that 20 minutes. If you are a shadow, if you are a minister or a shadow, I think you're allowed 30 minutes plus 5. And it coming, girl, my memory a bit hazy, and you're more recent on this. If you are a minister, you are a shadow to the minister, you are allowed 30 plus 5, 30 minutes plus 5. You don't realize how time flies until you start speaking. And then you start getting sidetracked. And then you start getting heckled. All of that, your time is going. And with the speaker that you have, he ain't about to give you back any particular time, unless it's time that he intervened. He will give you that back, but he ain't giving you back all them time when you got to when you getting heckled all over and you can't get through and them get through your thing and so on. 30 plus 5. And like I said, oh, and the leader of the opposition is allowed at least an hour. Usually, Barton Scotland allowed Jagdeo to drone on and on and on for over 3 hours. He didn't limit his time. I don't know that Manzoor is so generous because I remember watching when Arbery was opposition leader, and I remember him limiting Arbery. But Barton Scotland allowed Jagdeo to go on and on and on and on and on all the time without cutting him. He reasoned that as the leader of the opposition, he had to be given as much time as possible to put the opposition side. I guess there's some merit to what Barton had in mind, and but still, you can't overdo it. You can't over 2.5, 3 hours, you know. Because like I said, when you stand up there, and if you're a good talker, like me, you can go for about 6, 7 hours. So you got to get some limit. And of course, the person who presented the budget is given unlimited time to rebut and wrap up. Budget can't be seen as a, some perfunctory exercise, especially when you're talking about $1 trillion. And so to tell an MP that he or she is limited to 15 plus 5, 20 minutes to present their case, 20 minutes? So that whole thing has to be looked at all over again. Now we talk about shadow just now, and the only people to have named their shadow is APNU. Normally when the opposition is monolithic, I mean, one opposition like you had in the 12th Parliament, those shadows obviously come from that one party. Now you have a problem. So Win Party, which is the official opposition that produces the official opposition leader, they're also now the party that will name shadows. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I got 3 parties in Parliament. Unfortunately, their shadows will be the recognized shadows shadowing the government. And Terence Campbell's shadows will be shadowing their shadow. If you see what I mean. So if Miss X from Win shadowing Miss Brown, the Amerindian minister, she will get 30 plus 5 minutes to respond. As Miss Brown will get 30 plus 5 minutes in her presentation. But Miss Finance, who is shadowing Amerindian for the APNU, will only get 15 plus 5 minutes because even though she's a shadow, she's not the official shadow in Parliament. She's shadowing the shadow. Now, that is a problem now because the Win Party seems to, or has given the impression of not wanting to work with the APNU. I don't know people have put in their ears that if you work with the APNU, you're going to go down the road of the AFC. I've heard that. I've heard that from a win source. That if they're seen working with the APNU, they may end up like the AFC. But I didn't have to hear that from the win source. It's in Azruddin's every every thing that he says or doesn't say. There is no rapprochement in whatever he does in his relations with APNU. If you go back to the alleged WhatsApp message that he allegedly released, in which it is claimed, in which it is said in that message, Chief, you remember how Stacia and the coalition government strangled me and the old man, or treated me and the old man during their time in government. And he was talking here about taxes and so on, levying and so on. So together with his troubles, Azruddin has a dislike for an inbuilt dislike for the APNU because of his alleged treatment while the APNU coalition was in government. And that seems to have guided his approaches or non-approaches to the APNU. Y'all got to call a spade a spade. Y'all running all around the place and trying not to call a spade a spade. Call a spade a spade. I know y'all have made several attempts to engage, but by now you realize they don't want to engage. And it's up to y'all to devise your strategy of how you can deal with that. Because already, combined, the opposition is at a huge disadvantage. You are 7 seats adrift of the PPP. Even if you were 1 seat adrift, it has shown already that you'd have had a huge problem trying to convince the government. But at least life would have been a bit easier. But when you're 7 seats adrift, you have to come up with a different strategy. And if you're not going to unite around a common strategy, then you better start from now, not wasting your time trying to go after something that is going to be illusory. You better seek to pour whatever energy you got into a direction that will bring greater results than what you had. I'm not saying you got to unite, but I'm saying, listen, face up to reality. Face up to reality. Win wasn't born out of any love for politics or any love for people. As you well know, Win was born out of a circumstance. And the leader of Win is making it well known that my interests come first. The people is afterwards. We love to put the people in front. You know, it's about the people and the people and the people and the people. There will be no Win had Mr. Azruddin not find himself in the circumstance that he is in. So Win wasn't born out of a Cherry Dragon type desire to help poverty and poor people. Win was born out of a selfish desire. And it is being pushed to the maximum. If along the way, poverty and all these different issues can be attached, all the better. But IPNU and FGM and them, and the parties who are out of parliament, AFC and ALP and VPAC, y'all don't fool yourself. Y'all got a real fight on your hands to stay relevant. So that is as much as the shadows go. So of course on budget day, you expect the usual. Minister comes with his briefcase filled with his government's policies and plans and so on. And on that day, the business of the House is suspended to allow the reading of the budget uninterrupted. And as you know, usually on that day, nothing much else takes place. Perhaps all year before they meet, the whips may meet. The whips may meet with the speaker to determine time allocations, meeting times, how long the sessions will go for. Normally sessions will go up to 10 o'clock, with um, let me see, think 2 or 3 breaks. But since we're starting in since we are starting 2 o'clock, yes, I think you have tea and dinner, right? Something like that, or dinner and then something afterwards. So maybe 2 breaks, okay, 10 o'clock or thereabout, so that that particular day's business is finished. So there's a committee that does with that, a parliamentary committee, standing committee on something, right? I know Gail Teixeira and Amna Ali, the 2 whips used to meet and iron out those issues. So normally that will get ironed out or just prior before the session starts and so on. So I figured maybe that might happen this time around also. But importantly, you have a 10 o'clock meeting this morning for, of all things, the election of the leader of opposition, the leader of the opposition. An event, nondescript, an event nobody cared about. It will happen, but only on this time around. The speaker and the government conspired into making it an international event. An event where the international, the regional, and local people have so much interest. If we had the kind of flights and so on, I'm sure international people will be flying down here. But they have their correspondents here who will be feeding them. Can you imagine? The simplest of tasks of electing a leader of the opposition, as defined in Article 184, of the Constitution, has now been made into an international event. Why? Because of the machinations of the government and its speaker that is appointed by the government. Mr. James Bond, so much for your so-called 3 separate branches. These branches might be separate, but some of them aren't apart. And the branches might be separate, but we could talk about how much we want about what the literature and so on says about equal. These branches aren't equal. Some are more equal than others. This is Orwellian. And unlike the American that Mr. Nadir didn't seem to understand or never studied, asking where their opposition leader. How disgraceful. Imagine that whole thing gone to the whole international community. How much more can we disgrace ourselves? Haven't we disgraced ourselves already with Jim Jones and 4.2 tons of cocaine and all these kinds of things? We got to disgrace ourselves by asking America where's their opposition leader? America got minority leader and majority leader. The majority leader usually comes from the 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 the, the, the ruling or the party with the greatest numbers. The minority, of course, says that. And here is a little particular that you may forget or don't know. All the time, our constitution had leader of the opposition. The 1966 constitution talked about leader of the opposition. But in order to humiliate Cherry Jagon, the 1980 constitution changed leader of opposition to the minority leader. So Cherry Jagon, the leader of the opposition, then became the minority leader, a title borrowed, of course, from the United States, minority leader. The rest of the Caribbean, of course, had leader of the opposition and retained leader of the opposition, as per the British style. But guess what? After the PNC lost the election in 1992, Hyde became the minority leader. And he loathed that title of minority leader because it made him feel inferior. He loathed the title. So by time the constitutional amendments came around in 2000, he was insistent that that thing revert to leader of opposition. As in Paris now dead, otherwise he would tell you. Hyde loathed minority leader. And so it's the 2000 amendments that reverted the title to leader of the opposition. Yeah, so it's simple. Article and this is and Kodaki, sometimes you yourself are your worst enemy. You will recall that is on this program here a few weeks ago, long before anybody talked about it, that I talked about all of these different things about appointment of the opposition, and you know, giving you scenarios that perhaps 4 people can be poached from win, and and that other person become leader of the opposition and so on. You remember I gave scenarios, but I said it wouldn't be for long lasting, because there's an article there that says, and then I gave a whole thing about the recall legislation. All of these things, they don't reference the program nor me. They bring it now as if they're suddenly they're the exports on it. I'm not the export. All I'm saying is that I claiming, and this program should claim, that we force brought those things to the attention of the public. I think it was in September. Yes, I think it's around September. When we force on this program here brought those matters to the attention of the public. It's September, I think, or it's October. But we did it here. We did all of that here. And the recall legislation and so on. People are thinking that there may be surprises and so on. Listen, you know, in life there will always be surprises, but I don't see much of a surprise this morning. I don't see much of a surprise. They will meet, and they will do the nomination, and by a show of hands, because that is what the Constitution said, by a show of hands, those in favor, they show the hands, the count, good, we got the number, that it will be reported to the assembly, and then it will be reported to the president, and the president's appointee lead the opposition. I don't know, given the walkout at yet again a most unfriendly act. If you knew that there was a high possibility of Ajuddin going to the farewell, why didn't you excuse yourself by not going, send Todd, or send Robert Prasad? And in that way, nobody from the legislation nor the executive would have been involved. Send Robert Prasad, he's the foreign secretary. And I told you how the foreign secretary story came up too. And let him go. Everybody else will be busy with budget. And Miss Jane Miller, as understanding as she be, a very gracious woman and so on, she would have understood. But you're all torn up. You're all torn up. The man walks in and y'all embarrass the lady by walking out. And she just remained the same British stoic person, stiff up lip British. Yeah, walk out, good. This is my reception. It will continue. Who you think felt like a sentice? The lady? No, it's y'all who look foolish. Because, like I said, you could have sent Robert Prasad, and everybody else will say, listen, be busy with the budget and think, sorry, sorry. But she will have to pay her courtesy calls as she finally leaves, and you make up. It won't break the relationship that Guyana got with Britain and so on. But no, you go on there. You first do it to the Americans in 2014 with Brent Hart. Now you do it to Jane Miller. Go bravely, man. So you still got to sign and still got to recognize him if he's elected today and treat with him as leader of the opposition. I want to tell Mr. Ashidin something. If you get elected today as leader of the opposition, you need to humble yourself. You're giving off vibes that is going to rub the other members the wrong way. The thing is, before you can make a decision as leader of opposition, now that you got three parties in the parliament, you got to consult with the APNU and the FGM. And indeed, in some cases, you got to consult with the wider Guyana before you come to a decision. It's not just you think you could sit down in a dark corner with your people and, for example, nominate people to the Teaching Service Commission without getting the concurrence of the APNU and FGM. It's yours ultimately to make, but you can't do that decision without consulting the rest of the opposition and trying to get their agreement on your candidates. And as part of the leadership, you will indulge them by asking if they have candidates also that they wish to recommend for your consideration. This is not upmanship. The days of that done. You're now in parliament. If you got to think about the greater good. And you can't go antagonizing the rest of the opposition in parliament or the ones outside of parliament. So you may not want to unite with the APN. I don't think they want to unite with you either. But the uniting we're talking about is coming together to make certain that we pursue agendas that are similar for the greater good rather than wasting resources. Rather than wasting resources. You don't have all the answers. APNU don't have all the answers. FGM don't have all the answers. But together, we could narrow the differences. I think last week, Saturday, I saw a picture in the papers with the government, Ashni Singh, and the private sector. I was surprised because ordinarily they would have seen the individual organizations in the private sector. But I guess it's a good idea to bring all of them as one because generally they come up with more or less the same things. And in many ways, you could anticipate. You could anticipate what they're going to come with anyhow. I used to go through their previous submissions and write down certain key things. And I was never wrong, never. Because it's the difficulty I always had with the private sector. They feel that, and especially when they dealt with the coalition government, that they had some ransom over the coalition government, or they and it reflected in the disrespect in the 2017. I think it was the 2017, the disrespect in the coalition and so on. But how could you be dealing with captains of industry when you ask them, you said to them, okay, you want what removed from that item, or what removed from those equipment? Give me a paper, a study, or paper, or something. Show me how you reach the conclusion that moving that from that equipment will improve production and will earn us, the government, something as it earn you something. They don't produce a paper, but they go out there if they don't get it and say the government is anti-private sector. And the private sector must come out and say, over the last 5 years with this government, what study did the private sector has done and presented to the government to convince the government to remove concessions or to vary something or to implement X policy or Y policy. Produce the study. Not one. But every year they will turn up with the same basket of requests. Same basket, adjusted for the ones that they got in the previous year. Same one. And so I saw the picture in the papers. And I said, okay, it's not a bad idea. But wait a minute. This 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 meeting is taking place substantially into the whole budget process. What it is that they could tell the government at that point in time to make the government change what they've already done concluded. What? So I figure that this is just a show, a horse and pony show. A horse and pony show. And then I saw a video with the president of the GCCI. I think she's still the president of GCCI, extolling the virtues of the consultations and so on. And one time we went there and we asked for VAT to be removed on this thing, and we didn't think that it would happen, but there, when we read it was read, they removed the VAT and so on. Well, this is what these things are what they champion. This is what they champion, but they can't tell you. When she asks for the removal of the VAT on that particular thing, what has been the impact? Or what was the intended impact? What was the intended impact? I see even today's papers, my good friend Lowe, Elson Lowe, being interviewed by Kaicho News, asking for lower, I think, VAT and income tax and so on. I don't know whether he's doing that from a standpoint of a politician, ex-politician, or a technical and professional person. Because these things depend on what hat you're wearing. Depending on what hat you wear. But if I got time, I'll come back to that, or don't bother, just passing. The comment was made in the sense that there are too many requests that are being made, particularly that will result in, that have revenue impacts, that are being made without any study to convince the policymakers that this is an approach that they should take. Rather, They come to you, remove that from so 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 because it can help the people, and they expect you to do it. You, a policymaker, to do that when you can't convince your cabinet about the impact about it, and they ain't give you any study that you could rely on to convince the cabinet that look, this is what it's saying. And then, of course, this government, in its heartiness and its know-allness, it feels that it don't need to consult with the opposition. So since it has returned to power in 2020 in August, it has never invited the opposition for consultations and had the temerity, some of them, and their sycophants of saying, well, the coalition didn't invite the opposition. And I'm happy, my sister Annette, are you here? I'm getting like Lorly Nesto. Are you here? I'm happy that Annette, in her post, debunked such nonsense. I often tell people, and I will say it over and over and over again, as opposition leader, Jack Dio will rank as the most divisive person who ever served in that post. He made no bones very early because, first of all, they felt that they were robbed in 2015. People forgetting that they never attended Parliament when Parliament opened again. I think they opened. I think was it late May or early June or whenever it opened. No, they weren't there. They weren't there. And for several sessions, the PPP were absent in Parliament. Diagdio, as opposition leader, was only sworn in, I believe, about five, the fifth session afterwards. He wasn't sworn in the same day Parliament opened because opened because he never turned up. He and his party never turned up, and he always said he in cooperating. He was there out there. They were thinging GCOM, they were picketing GCOM and all this kind of thing. And he said he not cooperating with this government. From since then, he said the government was illegal. He didn't recognize it. He said he not cooperating with them except to do with the border. I said it 17 times. That's what he said. So we invited the opposition every year to the budget discussions. They turned up one time. That delegation was led, I think, by Clement Roy. Big delegation in my boardroom, I remember. Clement Roy. And by the time they left and before the ink could dry, everything was in the papers. We didn't even have time to digest it. Everything was in the papers. But they were a pony show. After that, they never turned up. Even though they were invited, they never turned up. Ask the press. They were there waiting outside of my door to see if the opposition will turn up. They never turned up. So when they're going around hollering how they weren't consulted, they were never invited, it is balderdash. And I'm happy that Annette reminded them so. Now it's going to be worse because with 7 seat difference, they don't care anything about the opposition. And therefore, I do not subscribe to Aubrey's position when asked at a press conference by a newspaper. Well, what do you think? He was keeping it close to his chest or something to that effect he was saying. I don't subscribe to that. Or you don't keep it close to your chest after the budget done prepare and for the debate. What difference will that make to them? What difference would that make to them? So I have always said from since Harmon was opposition leader, my advice to them is look, they're not going to invite you to these budget sessions. So you invite yourself. Put together a document, send it to them, and at the same time make it public. So even though they did not invite you, at least they will have the benefit of your thoughts, your thinking, and so on. And you will know through their budget and their product that they put out there whether they listened, whether they read, whether they internalize, whether they listen, and even if they came up with a variant of it, you still would have done well. You still would have done well. But you don't do that. And then you complain you weren't invited. Of course you weren't invited, but who cares now? There are many ways, as they say, of attaining the same goal. I had to fight through this foolishness also. When I was minister, I'll ask the ministers for their inputs into the budget. I will rarely get any. And when I go to the highest source, they would send me, some of them would send me some of these scraps of things. I would call them, man, why you want all of my things, man? What am I gonna say when the budget debate come up? That is the that is the attitude I used to get. Man, if I give you everything, I ain't got nothing left for the budget debate. Wait, this is a game? This is a surprise thing? So I see the same attitude coming through when RB says, no, he's not going to be saying no, he's waiting until the budget debate. So what you're going to do with the budget score points? It's not going to get in to the budget. We got to be better than that, smarter than that. Let us put a document out. A document could have been a variant of your manifesto. What would have likely been your first year? Give me a manifesto that you put out. That should have been your document. The first year of your manifesto promises. You put it out there. You put it out there. Short, sharp, snappy. Lots of colors. Lots of charts and so on. And you send it to them. Show them that you could be an alternate government. You're done, but you're not out. But then, my perspective is different. So, what can be expected today? Of course, last year represented the $4 trillion budget in the history of the country. And collectively, between August of 2020 and December of last year, the PPP government would have controlled almost $5 trillion in terms of the 6 budgets and supplementary requests made over those years, over those five plus years. Almost 5 trillion budget dollars. Compare that. Compare that to the $1.35 trillion made available to the coalition government for the period May 2015 to August 2nd, 2020. 1.35 trillion. That was all that was made available to us. And we made it count. We made it count. So we had roughly 3.5 times less than what the PPP had in a similar period. But we made those funds count. The problem with financing that nearly $5 trillion is what is of concern to all of us. Because during that period, roughly 8.5 billion US dollars, roughly 8.5 billion US dollars was accumulated in the Natural Resource Fund in that period, 2020 to the end of last year, roughly 8.5 billion almost, that was available to the PPP. Then there had been massive increase in central government revenue, and there had been massive increases also in other revenues, including low carbon credit and so forth. So the question is, where is all this money gone? What did it bring? What did it buy? What has been the outcomes? Those are the hard questions that have to be asked and answered in the budget. And we have to go among behind the rhetoric that will be said in today's. They'll spend, they will spend, it's amazing. I'm sure they're going to spend more time using out again the coalition that missing since 2020 August. They can spend more time using out. But you have to ask, go behind the numbers, get the statistics. Nearly $5 trillion has bought us a lot, but a lot of it questionable. Like, for example, the roads, the questionable roads. The Linden Highway cost us about 20 million US dollars how many years ago and stood up to the test of time, almost zero maintenance. The first leg of the Heroes Highway cost us 65 million US. And it took Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, to come here, enjoy the hospitality for the couple hours, and go over the Sonam and cuss we out about the bumpy road. Years ago, they would have called that the slip and fell road, the abortion road. And the government, who extolled the virtues of concrete roads when that road was finished, is now telling us that they always had in mind to asphalt the concrete road. After getting a tongue lashing from Marco Rubio, they put the tail between their legs and tell us that they always had in mind to asphalt that road. So and we talking here just the leg, the first leg, the leg where they give to all them 20-something different pieces of people, 20-something different companies, or 13, or how many companies they give to. You building highway, imagine, you building highway, and you're giving highway. One of the contractors of the highway, imagine, is a company more known for garbage than for engineering services. Can you believe it? We can't be real in this country, you know. I'm not saying that maybe they ain't got engineers, but I ain't hiring no company. I ain't hiring no company that is more known for garbage disposal to build no highway. What it says even about the company, if it doesn't want to change its name or or set up a separate engineering company, but instead incorporates an engineering company and a garbage disposal company. You ain't getting hired from me. I don't care how good you be. God, it wouldn't pass the smell test. But there you are, these set of people, none of them ever really, probably some of them never even built a footpath. They're among the people who building a brand new highway out of concrete. And in no time, in addition to the road being poorly built, bumpy and all kinds of things, it started cracking up. They put no weight. None of these roads seem to have any weights on them or so on. All these massive trucks driving and so on this concrete. Suddenly it started to flake and crack up and so on. But now, you will find in budget 2026, you will find in there an allocation for the overlaying of the asphalt road, of the concrete road with asphalt. You call that budgeting? That can't be serious budgeting, man. Can't be. And you build six regional hospitals, and several more are being built. And you have a women and children hospital at Ogle that is still to see the light of day. Schools all over. And look at the caliber of infrastructure. Even as you're building all over the place, the one that you just built can't even stand up for 6 months. Can't even stand up for 6 months. So yes, the government has spent nearly $5 trillion over the last 5 years. 5 trillion. And what have we? What we left hanging with? Yeah, we get a cash grant. Couple last year, right? Last year we get the cash grant. Yeah, we get a cash grant last year, a national cash grant. Only for the government to tell us now why we don't like cash grant, why we don't think cash grant is the way to go. But you didn't tell us that before the elections. You didn't tell us that before the elections. So while you can expect a cash grant in this year's budget, because they will not go that far as to not include it, as they said they include in this year, I can say to you clearly, it may very well be your last national cash grant. Instead, the government seems to favor, which in ordinary circumstances would have been the better approach, but they seem to favor doling out cash grant to whom they see fit. So if you are a fisherman, and I don't know who's a fisherman, you know, I do not know who's a fisherman. But fishermen suddenly is a category that seemed to be supreme in this country. In 2022, fishermen were favored immediately. There were over 7,000 plus fishermen back in that day, they said, and they got a cash grant. Then last year, out of the blue, no, this year, out of the blue, fishermen were again favored. Their figures have dropped slightly, but they were favored for cash grant. And of course, if you are a rice farmer, you are favored. So it doesn't matter whether you are inefficient, whether you should have been out of business a long time ago or not. The government is incentivizing your inefficiencies because they will be giving you a, a cash grant in the form of a subsidy for you to continue being inefficient. Under the guise that is food security. I tell you, when you don't got money, you're scratching your head. If we didn't have money, we would have been telling those farmers what they should have been told a long time ago. And we should have been assisting those farmers in the context of where the economy is going to go in a different direction. But no, we got money. We got money. But it's not only that we spending like we heading good, we spending without understanding our future. The debt, which was a mere 1.8 billion US dollars in 2019, and I say a mere because I'm comparing it to the number you're going to hear just now, because 1.8 billion US is a lot of money for debt. But this debt that was 1.8 billion in 2019 is estimated to have risen to 7.8 billion by the end of last year, US dollars. US dollars, 7.8 billion. So that's like over fourfold increase in 5 years. In 5 years. And I remember sometime, was it earlier this year or last year? Ashley Singh was on some program telling the woman, oh, the monies in the natural resource fund could pay off the foreign debt and have a little left over. I don't know what was the intent of that statistic or that metric, because at that a particular point in time that he was referencing that, uh, the, he did not provide any numbers to prove what he was saying. He did not provide any numbers to prove what he was saying. It was just said. The the two interviewers drank it up, and that's it. They're not blaming the two interviewers or anything. But if they were smart enough and snappy enough, they should have said something like, "How so? What are the numbers?" Some kind of thing like that. But they allowed him to say that, make that prose statement without any evidence to substantiate what he was saying. And even if he brought the evidence, it was just a supposition. It wasn't like if tomorrow they were going to draw out the money out of the thing and go pay after it. It was just a supposition to quell the growing apprehension over the debt. Because 1 week after he would have said that statement, for example, with additional disbursement or new debt, that statement would have been weakened. Just like how we keep cautioning about new debt, even as oil prices outlook are not favorable, especially with the developments that have taken place in Venezuela. At January the 3rd or so this year, oil prices were down, I think, to about $58 a barrel. Trump, after his escapades in Venezuela, He's on record as saying he's trying to bring it down to $50 a barrel. At that rate, Exxon will still be profitable because I think cost of production is for us out there somewhere around 30 something dollars a barrel. And so 50 will still give them a reasonable premium. But it will spell disaster for us. Even as it will spell some good. Let's deal with the good part. The good part, since we continue to import fuels, even though we produce it, when prices go down, then the import costs should be less. Fuel is a major input into almost everything that we do, and it's also a major end user in that uh, fuel. Fuel, you put fuel in your cars, and and you put them in your generators and so on. And so the theory is ultimately cost of production supposed to go down and prices supposed to go down. Of course, in Guyana, it is rare for prices to go anywhere but up, even when cost of production declines. You know, last week, I think it was after the president berated them, the Aircraft Association suddenly became benevolent and began to lower their prices, not by double digits, not by double digits, a 6% here, a 7% there, and so on. You really honestly feel that these aircraft association were being benevolent? Huh? You really? And let me ask you from now. I want you to check the prices of these airfares at the middle, say the middle of 2026, and see if they're still maintaining the 9% reduction. And if they're not telling you, well, spare parts have gone up, or we still maintain the 9%, but it was 9% adjusted on a higher cost of production. So we still maintain the 9%, but the ultimate price that is being paid by the consumer is higher than January, say, of 2026. But of course, Ali must have felt that he did a great thing in getting these people to lower their price. If you have given them every single concession in the book, because you wanted to show how bad the big bad wolf coalition was, all these taxes, taxes, taxes. So you take off all, as you claim taxes that we put on, you take off all. And still you got to berate them to have these reductions in the taxes reflected in their final price. He has been berating them for the last 2 years to reduce. Finally, they took a little shame out of the eye and they adjust prices. You see how quickly all of them adjust price? They're a cartel. They're a cartel. And I'm telling you, by the time he turn it back, them prices gone right back up. It's a show pony, dog and pony show. Dog and pony show. That is what we get in. And that's what we seem to like. Dog and pony show. So yes, so you got the prices falling, production being ramped up, So we are producing more oil at a lower price. Now, this may hurt Exxon's bottom line, but Exxon is selling that fuel. Exxon going and park that fuel in some underground bunkers and so on. It is Guyana who got to sell because we don't have any storage capacity. So once they give us our 1 million barrel, we have to sell it right away at the 50 something dollars. Now, 1 year ago, when it was 90 something, look at the premium we were getting. And look at the problem we were getting, trying to get these people to pay a cash grant given the high cost of living and so on. What you think gonna happen when the price falls to 50 or thereabout? When they're ramping up production, what do you think is gonna happen in terms of our revenue? And so so we are going to be depleting our reserves, chasing an illusion about paying off Exxon's investment so that we could get a bigger share of the pie. That is what Jack Dio tell we. We front loading so that we could catch up down the road. That's people who don't understand how the oil market is work. So we are going to be losing big time. We have no depletion policy. So we can't tell Exxon to ease off on producing because this price is too low. We don't have a depletion policy in place. None. So they are going at breakneck speed, digging out the oil that ain't gonna last you any longer than it should have. We're spending out most of the money in the natural resource fund on things that we can't see the results of. Instead of reducing poverty, we ended up today with 58% poverty, 32% in extreme poverty. And yet we're running out there hollering we're the fastest growing country in the world. Aren't we ashamed of these results? This is what you're going to be hearing more and more of today. Plastering the sores. But these cracks are now beginning to become crevices. Crevices. And we are not anymore interested in just cash grant. Cash grant is a bomb. It's a bomb on a festering sore of high cost of living, low productivity, an economy, instead of being diversified, is increasingly being calcified. At the last count, oil revenues are accounting for 87% of the export earnings of this country. 87% of the export earnings of this country. You understand what we're talking about there? You understanding how concentrated we are? You understanding how vulnerable we are? And oil has replaced labor intensive industries, which might have been a bit less efficient, but where, because they're labor, it means more money was concentrated at the bottom. Oil has come now and the wealth concentration has shifted, and it's now concentrated at a tiny top, a tiny top. So when you hear the private sector, and I see now Elson Lowe calling for threshold, income tax threshold, these things are not thought out. They're not thought out. And if anybody, I've said this before and I say it again, anybody who keeps moving and tampering with the income tax system, the way this country has tampered with the income tax system, doesn't know what they're doing, and it also reflects a high inflation situation. You don't be moving your tax threshold every year, every year, if inflation is not great. It reflects the high inflation in the country. Because it's only the other day that the minimum wage, I think, crossed 100,000. And yet you're asking again for tax threshold increase. Those people at the bottom at 100,000 ain't paying any taxes. The equivalent to the tax threshold. But yet you're asking for tax threshold increases. The private sector is asking for tax threshold increases. the minimum wage in the private sector is $60,000. What will a tax threshold increase do to a minimum wage employee in the public or the private sector? What would it do? What would it do? And if I had more time, maybe on Thursday, I'll pick this part back up, to show you how the oil economy, how the oil economy is emasculating or immiserizing the poor people in this country. And you don't even have to go down the road of corruption and them sort of thing. It's a lived reality in this country. The 58% poverty is a lived reality. What people can expect further in the budget and why they have tuned out, they're expecting to hear more roads, more bridges, more culverts, and all these different things. More of that. There's going to be a long list, tiresome list. And those will be done by that tiny group of friends and favorites and so on, who are going to be the inheritors of the wealth that is being created from the oil. They are the inheritors. I saw stats today reading Sheridan. Good morning, Sheridan. Kudos to you again. Wonderful letter in today's papers. Sheridan reminds us that of the 50,000 house lots that the government set the share out, only is how many? 4,000, only 4,000 and something has resulted in complete houses. Complete houses. What a startling statistic. What a startling statistic. But spare thought, what I would hope that they will do is cut all this nonsense about uh, tax adjustment here and tax adjustment there. Concentrate on people getting a decent salary. Because let me tell you something. When you go to the bank, if you give me a house lot, I strain to pay it, but I give you a house lot. My salary is $200,000. Now that's plenty. Let's say 150,000. North, 150, 160,000. I ain't paying no income tax or little income tax. How much loan you think I could qualify for with 160,000? Yeah? You ever ask yourself, government, why a lot of those lots got to remain there? You ever ask yourself why don't matter how much you tamper with the bank interest rate, it don't make a difference to those people because they don't qualify on salary. If you keep moving salary by 5% and 8%, it will take anywhere between uh, 15 to 20 years before they could reach 200,000, by which time that 200,000 is only worth about 60,000 in today's dollars at the rate at which inflation is going. Not the one that you announcing, is the one that is a lived reality. And so if you don't increase the people's salary, they ain't gonna qualify for no loan, and the house flat that you give them will bear busy grass. Or they're gonna sell it back quietly and get a substantial sum of money for it, which is what many of them have done. Sell it back to somebody else where they've got substantial sum of money. And 2 months from now, you see a big building going up in a poor part, small, with low income house flat. That's because somebody has sold their thing. Nobody with that kind of money would have been there. But y'all know all of this too. But it makes good thing to go out there and show people drawing lottery and all kind of thing, putting the hand in bag and smiling that they get a number. And when you don't show them having to go and get the donkey cart or the truck to wade through the mud and the grass and thing. And when they reach there, they still can't know which is their plot they own because it hasn't been surveyed. They haven't had markers, nothing. And even when that is done now, how an arch name they're gonna start building on a place that ain't got no drainage, ain't got no light, ain't got no water, ain't got no anything. But that part you ain't gonna show. That part Sherrod and the APN you know got to show. Because that is where the real story is. They will continue to show you those fancy places that don't build, but not the suffering people who got to trek through miles to go and find this lot that they were supposed to get. Now the people who waiting, who don't pay off, and they're still waiting to find or they get the number or get the name call and so on. Anyway, Kedaki, I got lots more to say, but I will leave it for I'll leave it for Thursday when we will continue this and look at the budget and see what was produced.